Good morning and welcome to the Leadership and Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky to be joined by Benjamin and Anthony from Collective Benefits. Good morning, gents. How are you?
Morning. Good, thank you.
Very good. Well, I've been promised that we're doing an expose of the man behind Collective Benefits. Well, look, you've been very successful in raising a good round recently, so you've been in lots of press. But for anyone who's not paying attention to that sort of thing, Anthony, if you could take us through Collective Benefits, who you guys are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, and it's great to be on the podcast. We try not to pay too much attention to the press. It's great when it's positive, but that's always one newspaper edition away from the negative, I guess. But building protections and benefits for independent workers. We have seen the tremendous growth in those choosing to work flexibly, whether that's worker or self-employed or agency or what have you, driven by the need for freedom and flexibility. But with that, many have opted into a model that has at times left them exposed, whether it's around accessing or protecting their independent work, or even just getting the well-being and joy that they would be granted as a full-time employee. The system hasn't made independent work for everyone, and frankly, we're on a mission to fix that. We've built a solution that allows platforms to deliver for their workers dynamic, usage-based, real-time protections and benefits to help them access work, to be safer in the work they do, as well as motivate and engage them and reward ongoing achievements. And so we've been able to launch the platform. We started here in the UK, now live across 27 markets, working with over 250,000 independent workers. I'm really excited, I think, about the opportunity ahead.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's obviously a massive kind of slug of regulation, right, in this market. It's been a bit of a topic of the press, and I know we don't touch on the press, but touching on the press again, like there has been a lot about, Uber's obviously been in the press a lot. One thing that I want to explore is kind of sometimes constraints are things that drive business, and I was wondering to talk about the regulatory environment. Is this a business born out of that regulatory environment, that kind of that sort of change in emphasis on who's employed and not employed? Is it sometimes the restrictions that have created this opportunity?
Yeah, I'm not sure the business is born out of that regulatory environment. I think what the business is born out of is a fundamental problem where independent workers had a protection gap. They lapped from being an employee in terms of sick pay, accident and injury pay, family leave, compassionate leave, etc. And I think what we found is that protection gap was being hindered by the regulatory environment, often by misinterpretation of that regulatory environment. There was a concern that if you were a on-demand platform, you weren't in a position to provide these kinds of benefits and insurance to your workers, and that's simply not true. There's never been a situation or been a case where the provision of benefits to workers, which actually makes them more independent, more secure, was something which was not allowed. So there's been a lot of confusion about this and a lot of uncertainty, and I think what we're seeing, particularly hotting up over the last year, whether that's Uber or others, is a lot of clarification about the way in which platforms work and work with their workers, and I think that clarification is actually helping the business more than not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose it's one of those outside looking in. I've probably got a surface level red top scandal version of what's actually happening. It's a good example. Kind of sound like Uber is often the one which is criticised most in the press, but actually Uber has always, prior to the Supreme Court decision, invested the most money out of all the platforms in ensuring that their riders and drivers are well protected. So often I think the red press top is sadly very misleading. Yeah.
If I could also say, aren't all businesses born out of a customer unmet want or need? Whether it's I have to go to a bookstore to buy a book, or whether it's I don't have the sick pay but I want to be flexible. I think everything is born out of an unmet need. I think what we've seen is an evolution of the market we operate in, driven by COVID and other macro trends. Convenience and delivery is now a wholesale part of the fabric of many households. And as a result, that's created operational and worker challenges, like many businesses who are scaling, where technology and new forms of risk transfer can fill the gap. And I think that's what we've morphed into from an initial inception point.
It's interesting. Talk to me about the kind of morphing. So is the business as we see it today and the way that you interact, is that sort of different from the initial premise?
Again, isn't all good businesses different? The initial premise, we were a sneaker company at one point. Now, day one was day one, right? So we had a problem in the market we felt was an unmet want and need, and we looked at the different personas who were facing that problem. I think what's clear is that the problem has never changed, and I think until it's mission complete, will never change. What I think has evolved is our route to the customer and the proposition, therefore, that associates it, from individuals to platforms. But also, I think the persona shift from initially, we were much more focused on what I'd say no-collar professionals, living in Brighton, doing web development, or even hosting their own podcast. But what we saw was an acute need for these protections, particularly through lockdown, as delivery and last mile logistics really expanded, the need for this being more pertinent within a certain persona and demographic. And that's drawn us to focus on specific areas initially.
So what do you, I mean, it's a difficult question for you to answer, and I appreciate this is kind of one of those.
One for Ben then.
Yeah. So Ben, no, but this, I've sort of put this question in there, and it's probably difficult to answer, but I think it's an important one. Like, the gig economy is another thing that is kicked around as is it a good idea? Is it not? I think in principle it is, but is there a risk that, you're obviously fulfilling a need, which is kind of to provide those kind of benefits that people might not get in a traditional gig economy? Insurance is a social good. I genuinely believe that. But what do we think about the gig economy? Is generally that good for society, or is it kind of, for me, it's not necessarily the case, and perhaps it's kind of a side effect of kind of an inefficient economy as it's working at the moment. I just wondered if you give a comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a dramatic and rapid development of the gig economy. It's something which is born out of the financial crisis in 2008, and something which hasn't always grown in the most sustainable way. But that said, is the gig economy good? I mean, my answer to that would be yes, absolutely, it's good. It's good for people working who may have caring requirements, who may have part-time roles, they may be studying, and enables them to earn in that space. So I think the flexibility of gig work is something which is hugely valued, and our members time and time again tell us how much they value that. We've also been doing some research recently on do people find their work meaningful in the gig economy? And the answer is yes, they absolutely do. There is something meaningful about being taking someone safely from one place to another, about delivering food to a family who are having a family meal. There's lots of things which are very meaningful about that work. So I think, is the gig economy a good thing? Yes, I think there are people who want to work in the gig economy, and it enables them to do so. It enables us as customers of that service to benefit as well. Can you imagine how we would have got through lockdown without the food delivery services and other delivery services that we now take advantage of so regularly and so frequently? So is it a good thing? Absolutely. And if it wasn't a good thing, it wouldn't be so omnipresent across the world.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that last point. I would, if it wasn't a good thing, it wouldn't be omnipresent. But I do think the flexibility and the kind of ability to act as individuals are very sort of strong telling point. And also,
but it's it's grown for a reason, Alex. It's grown because people want to engage in that work, and people want the benefits of those services. Do you remember what it was like trying to wait for a minicab before Uber?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a bit selfish. I lived in London for most of that time, so it was quite easy. But it was.
It's become a popular discussion around gig economy, and that has a very subconscious resonance with people for Deliveroo, Just Eat, Uber in the UK particularly, right? But I actually think we need to be careful about blanket labeling things. I think if anything, accuracy of information is critical. And whilst in food delivery there may be a very lively debate, I think in many industries it's absolutely part and parcel that people operate and are able to choose without discrimination to operate in that way. When was the last time you hired a full-time plumber? When your boiler goes down, no one cares that they're a subcontractor with no sick pay for a fulfillment agency who's got a contract. Similarly, people who are getting loved ones to come and care for Alzheimer's patients and disabled people in their home, but these people maybe need flexibility to send money home. Again, nurses in the NHS, there's many people who operate independently and for whom the flexibility and freedom is essential to live and work in big cities like London. Yeah, I'm from Liverpool. You can travel across town quite quickly to do a nursery pickup or look after a loved one. But in London and these huge mega cities around the world, yeah, commuting, traveling, actually some people need midweek off. And I think that's a very important part of modern lifestyle that sometimes gets forgotten in the debate around are delivery drivers appropriately classified. And it's a very important distinction, I think, that needs to be made.
Yeah, no, and I think, I take your point as well, that I think when we think gig economy, we instantly think of, food delivery drivers, but it's it's broader than that, completely. I mean, in my sector, I'm a recruitment professional. That's what I do, and for years there's been people that are career contractors, and you put it another way, they're gig economy workers. I had one guy who became my hero that was very blatant about the fact he worked 6 months a year and the rest of the year he went skiing, because that's what he wanted to do. And now the legal environment has changed, so that person now does get benefits. But at the time, it wasn't that person was getting benefits. They were getting paid well, but everything else they were looking after. So I think the definition of what gig economy is definitely gets swept into the one bucket, and it doesn't often get presented in the kind of best way, because I think it also gets tied in with that 0 hours contracts conversation, which is generally takes a negative tone as well. But look, I didn't bring you on just to sort of answer the social ills of the world, because I think that's unfair. But I'd love to kind of get your comment on.
But it is fair that there are social ills about this, and that's something which we and the platforms that we work with are determined to change. Individuals, just because they choose flexibility, shouldn't be at a disadvantage in terms of their financial safety nets.
Sure.
That's fundamentally what we believe, and that's what we stand for.
Yeah.
Seems quite self-serving for us to say the gig economy should survive. Someone may take a nefarious view that they're that way inclined, but actually we've dedicated our lives, we left our jobs, we've invested our time and passion and commitment because we believe in actually the model of flexible work combined with the model of social protections that we hold so dear within Western Europe. And so it's not just that we think we'll sell more insurance if people remain gig economy, it's that insurance has a role to play in ensuring independent work works for everyone, and that's really what's very important for us.
And I think that's the thing. I mean, I'm a big proponent of it. I mean, when I originally left my full-time employment to work for myself, it wasn't to create some company, it was to work for myself. So it screams to me. I mean, I went to work on film sets and trained as an actor, and just because I had the time to do that, I wouldn't have been able to in full-time employment. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of it, and it's something I strongly believe and encourage people to do. But talking about social issues and social, you guys have a head of social impact. So I wanted to talk about that. What's the thinking behind that? What does that actually mean in practical terms for you as a business?
Yeah, I'll go first for Antti will chime in. Fundamentally, at the heart of what we're doing, we're trying to make people's lives better. We're trying to make people who otherwise lack protection have the protections they need so they can live and work without compromise. So social impact is very much at the heart of what we do. And it's at the heart of how we communicate who we are, both to external platforms, both as part of our employee value proposition. But we need to make sure that we are delivering real impact, and we need to make sure that we are making the change to people's lives that we believe we are. And if not, how can we make it better and progress it further? So having that dedicated function in the organization is something which is really at the key to who we are in the heart of our organization. Early stage business has that role, but we do, and I think that speaks volumes about what we're trying to achieve.
So what does that person, because I wouldn't, as a recruitment professional, I wouldn't know how to write that job spec. What does that person actually do on a sort of practical day-to-day?
Maybe rather than what they do, let's talk about the unmet need that they fulfill, right? Because people can do whatever they want, but what's the value of that? I think ultimately, worker well-being has become a battleground for platforms and workers. And for the platforms, there is many impacts of this. It can impact the realization of their own values. Clearly, it leads to reduced reputational risk. It can lead to high worker churn or low retention, acquisition challenges. But also, as we've seen recently with Uber promoting their worker well-being to customers, it has an impact on customer adoption and sustainability. So it's right at the heart. With anything that you're trying to improve, any metric, the number of listeners of your podcast, the number of insurance policies that you sell, you need a metric to track. No metric's perfect, but you're looking for leading and lagging. And actually, there has been a gap around how people evidence and articulate the worker well-being work that they do. How do you classify it? How do you track improvements? Is it an all or nothing game? What happens if I add a little bit? And ultimately, social impact is a framework that allows people to evidence and articulate back the work they're doing on worker well-being. And that can be the difference between a £2 billion loss on your share price for Deliveroo versus a £2 billion premium paid by DoorDash for. So it's a £4 billion commercial question that didn't have a framework to answer before. And that means we can go to partners, to workers, to society as a whole and talk about the ways in which worker well-being is being fulfilled. Do we contribute? Yes. We've absolutely mapped our business against ways we can contribute to that worker well-being. But we're absolutely not a panacea. We're not an all-in-one solution to the problem. And actually, there is many things that impact worker well-being, and we're just helping evidence and articulate it.
Yeah. So just for clarity, so this person is working with partnerships organisations. It's not just an internal looking collective benefits. That's really interesting because it parallels nicely with some of the stuff I've seen in cybersecurity and actually ESG, in that people are working with organisations to say, right, we want to have an ESG policy for underwriting. Well, one of the ways to do that is you can't instantly just go, well, we're not going to underwrite anything that doesn't fit this. You've got to work with organisations to go, how do you move them towards being ethical, sustainable in what they do as a business model, and therefore you can underwrite with them going forward. But it's a partnership. It has to be a partnership. Otherwise, it's either a yes or a no, or it isn't a partnership. It's dictatorial. And obviously it's a bad business model if you're just going to turn it away.
It's a journey for organizations. It's a journey for us as well. We have very firm beliefs about worker well-being, and what is the minimum standard that individuals should expect. If you're on a job doing something for where a platform is earning money out of that, the very least you can do is ensure they have the right level of protections in place. That's something we believe, and it's something we want to evidence, and the platforms we work with, we want to share those values. There might be a journey in how we get them there, and that needs to be a partnership. It's really important.
It's fascinating to me because it's well known that in my world, when people move job, they're never moving for, it's never comp. It's always like either the opportunity is too great to miss, but usually it's about fulfilling roles, and then it's all those kind of additional bits. So it's interesting what you mentioned, Anthony, about the kind of people being more fulfilled in their role, and they have more fulfilling jobs, and obviously like base levels of protections are part of that. It's part of that employer well-being package. So how do you know your employer cares about your well-being? Well, they've invested in it as anything else. Ben, something you and I talked about prior to in previous conversation was about B Corps, and I was interested to, because of the kind of values that you guys demonstrate, I wondered why, if you were going to make a move towards that journey to be a B Corp, if not, why not? I just wanted to, because obviously some businesses have a similar value set to you. So I wondered if it's something you'd considered, and if you haven't, then why wouldn't you be interested in doing it?
Yeah, I think the B Corp movement's a fantastic movement. I think we've seen that also growing around the world, and we've seen companies large and small adopt and go through the B Corp certification process. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we have ruled out, but I think at the heart of what we're doing is social good, and we're very focused on building that. So we don't feel, I think it's something which we are required to do to prove our kind of social chops, if you like. Mm-hmm. It's inherent in who we are, but certainly it isn't something we've ruled out, and we can certainly see the value of it. And I think we've seen the value of that in a number of businesses, like Lemonade, for example. Like, I think it's really helped with their consumer proposition. Mm-hmm. And that's not something which we yet focus on in terms of direct to consumer. So but I think if you're going to do it, you've got to do it for the right reasons, and you've got to do it because it's true to your business, and you've got to heavily invest in it to make it work. And at the right point in time, that might be something that we take on.
I think I would love to see a world where we can help create a B Corp relevant for platforms and gig workers, where we can create a benchmark for what we think social impact means within this framework. B Corp is very focused on the actions of boards and executives within commercial entities. I think we are driven by a different passion for a different change towards sustainability. And we've always thought about how do we help define this category in conjunction with our partners. And our partners need to believe in the basic fundamentals, as Ben noted earlier, that we believe in. It's not just about product, it's about impact. And I don't expect anybody to try and spend money if they can't articulate the value. But if they can and they don't believe, then it's not about a certificate for us, it's about fundamental change.
Yeah, I always worry about these things, but as soon as you sort of certify something, it can become a, certifying for certifying's sake. It's a good thing to kind of promote your business, and that's, I know that's a cynical view, but unfortunately that's what these things tend to have happen.
We've got no interest in doing something for the sake of greenwashing.
Sure. Exactly. I mean, greenwashing is exactly the right kind of analogy. So I wanted to take you back, something we talked on the pivot of the business earlier, and I thought it was such a good comment, as there's like, who doesn't, if you're in this sort of...
Well, it's a graveyard of people, actually. Maybe I should say it's only the companies you know about who solve what unmet want and need. There is a graveyard of ambition, energy, and money. Mm-hmm. For people who were building to not meet an unmet want and need. It's just as simple as that, right?
Yeah, completely. But in your sector, I did want to know that you have a B2b model. Did you look at B2C? Was that something you thought about?
So our primary distribution channel has been through the partners, but as a marketplace, we enable both customers, members, and partners to participate. And so it's not have we ruled in or ruled out any single line of distribution. It's about protection, access, joy, and well-being they need to have a sustainable, independent career. And so there is absolutely occasions on where it would make no sense to not enable members to purchase certain things or manage certain things themselves. That could include motor insurance if they just need to buy motor and get live. The platforms maybe won't buy that. And all the way to the other end, where individual rewards and benefits are at the discretion of the member, right? If they're the ones that they choose to take advantage of. So choice for members is at the heart of how the platform and marketplace works, as opposed to a linear approach to kind of retail or commercial on the insurance side.
I suppose it speaks to your kind of ethos again, doesn't it? It's about individual choice, right? Gig economy, you're putting people who are choosing to do it, you want to give them the choices to make the choices around their benefit structure and things like that.
The gig economy is not a subsector of underserved people. The gig economy is nearly 50% of the workforce in some form or another. We don't believe we should be telling anybody how to set themselves up for a successful career. We want to give them a tool, and we want to remove challenges of access to basic financial and well-being products so that people can subscribe into a model that makes it not just as good as being an employee, actually better. I don't see why being independent cannot be better on every single front, with solutions like ours, whether that be tax, or whether that be pensions, or whether that be mortgages. I think there's many people, but right now it still remains harder to be independent in that part of your life, and we want to fix that once and for all.
Yeah. Talk to me about mortgage issues. I
don't want to.
I could fill a very boring and long podcast, but that, I mean, it does speak to that point, is that, you know, I was thinking that as you were speaking, I was going, there are challenges fundamentally of being self-employed and getting access to things like mortgages, which just, or going through the process personally, just, it feels antiquated. I'm like, why are we in a world where my affordability is not in question, but the mechanism in which the banks operate and offer mortgages is not fit for purpose, essentially? You know, they're saying, oh yeah, you can afford it, but we're not going to lend you the money because we have this metric where you're not employed.
Again, new demographics require new models, whether that's underwriting for risk transfer, or whether that's underwriting for loans, whether that is experiences. So across the board, access to new data sets, better understanding and profiling of personas is only going to lead to more relevant and necessary products in the market. That, again, that's fundamental for any business.
Sure. So you guys launched in 2019, is that correct? 2019?
2020. We launched on the fabled 1st of April.
Why is that? Why?
Fire the researcher, Alex.
Well, I don't want to cast shade, chaps, but you've seen these questions as well.
I think we started planning the business in 2019. We launched in April 2020.
There we go. That makes me feel better.
That's not far, anyone.
Yeah, all our dreams have come to reality. We had a team. We were based out of Facebook's office in Soho. 3 square meals a day. It was fantastic. Then on the eve of launching, we went into lockdown and everything else. So it was a very interesting time, actually.
Yeah. How did, talk me through that? Because in your sector, some really interesting things happened with regards to your kind of base. But did it? How did it impact you? Did it change strategy? You know,
there was an initial period which I think applied to everyone of just in terms of complete uncertainty. You know, what is this going to mean at all in terms of our business and how it progresses? You know, I distinctly remember a conversation with Anthony saying, "No, well, about 2 weeks' time, there are going to be no more emails. I'm not going to hear from anyone, and we need to decide, what do we do? What do we focus on? How do we keep the team engaged?" So there was kind of like our internal conversations. What we then saw was those who we now work with and serve became effectively key workers.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw a massive rise in courier logistics delivery and the need for those services over that period. So, we were one of the beneficiaries of I think what became commonplace and standard practice for you to start ordering things on and using those services. So we saw a massive growth in those platforms and those businesses, and we saw a massive need for those individuals to be protected. On the front page of the newspapers in late March and into April here are a group of people in society who we now incredibly depend upon, who are underserved and underprotected, and there we were the solution for it. I wouldn't like to say that the pandemic was a lucky moment for us. It wasn't. It was an awful moment for a lot of people, but it certainly helped people understand why we existed and what we were trying to achieve.
Old adages are always the best. And I think one of them says, there's no such thing as good luck. It's just about great decisions in a bad situation. And the pandemic is certainly, well, listen, a lot of people are opportunistic in there's certain people who did PPC or whatever it was, deals with the government who found themselves very well remunerated. So lots of people saw the shifting landscape. Delivery firms, fast fashion firms, all saw the change in behaviors drive a new unmet want and need, and that was certainly true for us. Having said that, we had grand ambitions for hospitality. We had grand ambitions for certain sectors that faced quite the opposite impact. And back to my point on delivery consuming the narrative on gig economy, and not so true that it was opportunistic for a company like a Collective in spaces that were so badly affected. So pluses and minuses, but ultimately you don't really have to explain why someone might need sick pay in the middle of a COVID pandemic. And to that extent, you know, it does some benefit for the realization of the problem that people face.
Yeah. As that, do you think, have you seen is that a sector part of it, for example, that's taken off more? Because, for example, I know personally for myself, like I hadn't had private health cover for a while. I got private health cover, like just in the middle of it, because I was like, well, it's highlighted a need for me. But
I think initially everyone was just trying to work out how to operationalize their business whilst taking into account things like contactless delivery and mask wearing, and, you know, private hire vehicles. And that whole industry was very badly damaged, given that people weren't out taking taxis home. So not inherently, it wasn't just like an absolute bombshell in that sense. But I would say that ultimately it led to food delivery, Q-commerce, parcel delivery, B2b, those type of kind of fulfillment services becoming a core part of the fabric of the nation, actually across Europe, really. In a way that hadn't been seen growth-wise for a while, and so I think that's been a big part of it.
Sure. I wanted to just shift gears slightly and talk about. I'm getting nervous about my points I've written down here in case my data's. Let's gamble. I read somewhere that you've made a conscious decision not to go into the US, which is obviously a massive market. I'm hoping that's accurate, and I just kind of want to understand kind of, is there. What's the overarching thing about that, or is it something that's potentially for the future?
Yeah, look, you can't boil the ocean, and you've got to start somewhere. And so, you know, we started initially UK focused, and then moving to across the EU. We have a few outliers outside the EU as well, including Israel and Japan. Have we taken on America yet? No. Are we saying no, never? Absolutely not. Yeah. But right now, I think there is, you know, more unwanted vets and needs, as Anthony would put it, in the parts of the world that we're serving, who we can support and make a real difference.
Yeah, sure. And obviously, yeah, I always like to sort of round up towards the new year. We're approaching the new year very rapidly. 2022. What are we going to see from you guys? It's just like more explain, you know, big growth plans in terms of kind of hiring, new markets, or just growing out from those markets that you've just listed in terms of kind of more boots on the ground, perhaps?
I mean, the political answer is growth. Global domination. USA next. Nobody's here. You know, I'll tell you, I'll give you, you know, actually, I think one of the areas we're very focused on for next year is the member experience. And in insurance, that's often related to claims, and absolutely that's a huge area of opportunity, but just the end-to-end member experience, what a member feels and experiences as part of Collective is somewhere we are passionate about continuing to invest in, and that's driving a large part of our workforce growth. I think similarly, alongside protection, well-being, joy, access, there is key areas we think the same innovation and remodeling can have massive impact. And so we're pretty focused on a couple of core product initiatives. I won't delve much deeper so people keep a bit of mystery, but again, you know, members being at the heart of how we think about this problem and the personas of those members. So that probably gives you an indication to our mindset heading into the new year.
Yeah.
So can I talk about one thing that we did actually that I was very pleased about, I think brings it together. We've been hosting these pop-ups. So we've been launching exactly what it sounds like, taking containers, dark kitchens, doing lounges like private member clubs in all the places where gig economy people hang out, so they can get a coffee and a free snood and swap ideas and get access to learning languages and whatever it might be, just giving them a cafe to hang out in. And this is really at the core of, it's not just about productizing insurance, but I think it's about building a community that they can feel part of. And the pop-ups are an initiative that's, believe it or not, in the real world for a digital tech company, I think exemplifies how we want to build relations with our community.
I consider both of that. I every Thursday morning, me and a lot of people that run small recruitment businesses, we have a coffee and over Zoom, and we've been doing that the whole of the pandemic because
you can franchise our Collective Cafe brand and call it the Collective Cafe for independent recruitment consultants.
There we go.
Yeah, but that kind of sharing tips and tricks and things, it's something which is key to success in any business, any community. We met an extraordinary guy who knows how to convert your push bike into an electric bike. These are the bits you need to buy on Amazon. This is how you do it. And he was explaining to the others around him, like, this is what you do. And having that push bike, moving from a push bike to an electric bike, means you can do more deliveries, you can increase the catchment area you can deliver, and you can make more money, you can earn more, you can be more financially secure. That gets lost. Those bits get lost when we talk about this demographic and who they are and what they're trying to achieve.
Social bonds, human connections, peer-to-peer learning. We're not doing a training course here, but everybody needs these in old school Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the core of people's desires, and that isn't lost because you do a different type of task. It can be digital, but it can be all types of things.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I think particularly for the thing that resonates with me, that sort of that sense of community. I mean, that's why we do this. Talk about this Thursday morning thing. The reason we do this is because we're all kind of 1 to up to about 8-man businesses, and it's a sort of lonely. It can be quite a lonely existence, but that kind of sharing of ideas and there's a sense of community built there. And of course, there are tips and tricks and things like that. Sadly, no one's taught me how to electrify a bike yet, but we have talked about
I just came this morning from a breakfast with another group of COOs where we moaned about CEOs like Anthony, and what a pain they are to work with.
I was going to say, largely it's us being like, just letting off steam.
That's off the record, right? We're straight out. This slander from my partner on podcast.
No, we wanted to meet on the bone, but look, we've hit that magic 45-minute mark. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being guests. I'm really interested in what you're doing. I really believe in it, and thank you for letting me challenge you on it, because otherwise it wouldn't be an interesting podcast. So, thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, Alex.
Thank you.